Hello there, welcome back to Elder Bear Farm. We're going to do just a quick talk today, something I wanted to share for a while, and finally got a minute in a busy schedule to share this. I want to talk about this idea of what is permaculture. There's probably hundreds of videos on YouTube that address this. I've probably seen half of them, and one of the things that I listen to Jeff Lawton a lot, as I'm sure a lot of you probably do. Usually once I click on a video where he's talking, I can't put it down. Just unbelievable treasure trove of information that he has. And one of the things that I've heard him say is that permaculture is, I don't think he used these words, but it's essentially open source. No one owns it. And that's one thing that I think is really cool about it. All around the world, people can kind of share their own iterations of it, add things to it, change things, and it's all just becomes part of this huge movement that is permaculture. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today, is my take on it and how I sort of came to use it, to learn from it, and how it's affected me since doing so. And for starters, I grew up as a kid. I had a vegetable garden. And so that was a part of my life and childhood, was growing vegetables in my suburban yard. And to me, it seemed really obvious right away, like, why wouldn't you grow food in your yard when you can and you don't have to buy it at the grocery store? It tastes better, it's fresh, you can grow whatever you want. I loved being outside, so that part was really fun to me. And so it just seemed obvious. As an adult, I just didn't have a lot of space to grow or time to grow, and I finally became very fortunate 9 years ago. I was able to buy this property at Elder Bear Farm. We're on exactly a half acre right outside of DC, which in and of itself is not easy to find. But this specific half acre, as you may have seen in some of the other videos, has plenty of sun. That's almost impossible to find. You might be able to get a lot this size, but it's usually going to be full canopy trees, because the trees have been there since the houses were there, and that's 100 plus years ago. So just incredibly fortunate to have this laboratory to learn from and to just try all these different things. And I was first wanting to put in some type of herb bed area, and so I started looking around YouTube and the internet to see just some creative ideas of putting in an herb bed. And I came across the herb spiral, and I watched a few videos about the herb spiral, and I kept hearing, this is permaculture, this is a permaculture concept, we're using permaculture principles. It piqued my interest, to think like, oh, well, I like this herb spiral thing, like, what's this whole permaculture thing about? And so I started looking at videos on permaculture, and as many of you have probably done yourselves, went through down that rabbit hole, all the hundreds of amazing videos there are and information out there. I bought some of the best books out there on permaculture, some of the best authors, and just learned everything that I could about it. And one of the things that I thought was so fascinating was that a lot of the ideas behind permaculture I was already doing on this property. And I was doing them because they were intuitive to me. They made sense. And I felt like it was a validation, not just of what I was doing, but it was like a validation of permaculture, because that's really what it is. I had come onto this property and I could have been more patient, but I was forced to be patient about certain things. I didn't have the resources to just, throw 100 fruit trees in on day one. So I kind of had to wait and do things, and I didn't have the time to do all the care that needed to happen. So I did things piece by piece, and as I was doing that, I was watching the land and learning from the land, and just trying to see what works and what doesn't work, and make changes and adjust, but really try to make everything as smooth and efficient as possible. Lo and behold, that was largely what permaculture was about, I would come to find. And so since then, in the last few years, I have continued to learn from people doing permaculture all over the world, apply different concepts, try out new things, different things. I've taught classes, I've had permaculture design certification courses come here and learn from what I've done here. But one of the things that I see that's missing out there a lot of times when people talk about permaculture is the connection to indigenous cultures and indigenous values from all over the planet. And when I go back to this idea that one of the central themes of permaculture is listening to the land, I know from the little that I know about certain cultures all over the world who have been here for thousands of years, that that's a central tenet of who they are, what their identity is this idea that the land is the most important thing. The land is what feeds you, it's what takes care of you. If you don't take care of the land, you're doomed. And so that transcends just a practical kind of everyday importance for these cultures, and it really goes into the spiritual and like just the deepest part of who human beings are, that we are forever tied to the land in a very special way. You can use the analogy of like children and their mothers, just forever tied together. And I don't hear people who talk about permaculture kind of acknowledge that enough. And so I wanted to share some of my thoughts about that. I picked this location standing in front of our Hawaiian sign here. Hawaiian culture is a culture that I do know a little bit about because my wife is native Hawaiian, and we have family there. We spend a lot of time there, and over the last couple of years I've really been trying to learn a lot more about native Hawaiian practices, specifically when it comes to taking care of the land. Land in Hawaii is translated as aina. Aina, the word though, has a huge meaning. It does not mean the dirt or the soil or even the planet or the earth or any of that stuff. It's something really deep that kind of encapsulates spirituality, love, connection to other people, stewardship. All these ideas are kind of drawn into what aina is. And the sign, ua mau ke ea o ka aina I ka pono, basically means that for you to say that the land is yours, you have to take care of it. You have to be connected to it. You have to love it. Otherwise, it's not yours. You don't deserve to be there, essentially. And I love that statement. It means so much to me. I connect so closely to it. And we're here outside of DC, as I said. This is Piscataway tribal land. I don't know as much about Piscataway Nation to talk about, some of their cultural practices and values and things, but I'm positive that they have something very similar in their culture that talks about the connection of the people with the land. You may be familiar with certain types of creation stories coming out of other indigenous cultures around the world, and you almost always have those creation stories having something to do with like where the land came from and how it's connected to people. And that was the point of those stories, was for them to pass it on from generation to generation so that their children understood the value of the land, the true value of the land. And I'm bringing this up because, as I said earlier, that's really what permaculture is. Without that love of the land, that true kind of deep spiritual connection to our connection with the land, all that other stuff is virtually meaningless. All the peripheral things about design and science and research and even just the practical applications of guilds and no-till and all this stuff, it doesn't mean anything. If you can't stand on a piece of land and find a way to listen to what the land is telling you and to connect with it and to truly deeply care about it, none of that other stuff is going to make any sense. And that is what indigenous cultures have been doing, practicing, saying for thousands of years in some cases. There's a political component to this, which is part of why I want to share this. Indigenous cultures have faced massive erasure all over the world. We hardly ever pay attention to anything concerning indigenous cultures. So it'd be a tragedy, a shame for permaculturists to constantly go on and on and on about how much we love the land without even referencing the connections to the indigenous cultures from our various areas. I think that we need to do a better job. We need to bring that up more. We need to learn more about it. We need to talk more about it. We need to find people who have been practicing those traditional indigenous values, who can teach us about that, who can show us. We need to show more respect for that. We need to just do all those things, because to me, that's one of the biggest pieces of what permaculture is, and I don't hear about it enough. So I just wanted to put my 2 cents in on that. Hopefully that was interesting, kind of gets you thinking about where you are and who you can learn from. Share in the comments section any information that you might have. Go out there, learn more, make your own videos, try to spotlight these ideas, and yeah, I think we can all definitely benefit from that. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't. We're gonna be making a few more videos talking about some big changes coming up soon. So stay tuned, and we'll see you back here at Elder Bear Farm real soon.